Hello, everyone, for those who've made it out so far. Thank you for coming to our first speaker series event. I am Noah. I am the president of the Outdoor Club this year. I am doing my master's at Mac in biology. And so we'll pass it around to the next exec that are here. There's quite a few of us. Who wants to go next?
Hi, I'm Gabrielle. I'm the gear coordinator this year, and I'm in my undergrad in the arts and science program.
Hello, everybody. I'm Brian. I'm the vice president internal with the Outdoor Club here, and I am in my 4th year of automation technology.
I'm Hannah. I'm one of the trip coordinators for the Outdoor Club this year, and I'm in my 2nd year of astrophysics at McMaster.
I didn't even know there was astrophysics at McMaster. Wow. Okay.
Oh, nice. Peter.
Oh, Peter Morley. Wow. How exciting. I know Peter.
You guys did the Baffin trip together, didn't you?
Yeah, we sure did. Wow. Hey, Peter.
Hi, Peter.
Hey, Maya, how are you?
Oh, I'm amazing. Wonderful. Nice to see your face.
All right, so why don't we get into things? So before all of our events, we always start with our land acknowledgement. So McMaster University recognizes and acknowledges that it is located on the traditional territories of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee nations and within the lands protected with the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. If any of you are not in Hamilton, we like to suggest that you look up whatever treaties exist for your area. It's good to know and respect them. So tonight we have Maya March. She spent 8 years leading trips at McMaster through the Outdoor Club and with Altitude, which is part of the App and Rec department. And some of her favorite trips have been Grand Canyon and the Rockies, backpacking Baffin Island, and caving in Kentucky. During her many years at McMaster, she spent her summers in the Canadian subarctic, guiding wilderness expeditions for Canadian river expeditions, like whitewater rafting, canoeing, hiking, and that sort of stuff, on rivers in the Yukon, the Northwest Territories, and Labrador. Since 2004, she's worked for Parks Canada, spending 5 years as the park manager for Tuktut Nogait National Park in the Western Arctic in the Northwest Territories, and is currently on the visitor experience team for Georgian Bay Islands National Park in Ontario. So, Maya, thank you for being here. And I'll let you.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, this is like the most exciting thing I've got going on all month because I'm working from home and during lockdown for the government. So can everyone hear me okay? I was having some pretty bad internet problems earlier today. We're good? Thumbs ups? So I'm going to talk a little bit more. I'm interested in any questions you guys might have. So one of the ways that I find works really well in Zoom is if you have a question, just raise your hand and then I'll know. And feel free at any point. Don't worry about interrupting me. I tend to ramble, so you're welcome to at any point. So thanks for having me. This is great. And I didn't expect, Noah, that you would kind of give me an introduction like that. I was going to say a lot of that, but mock, sort of setting it out of what I was going to talk about today is a bit of my career from McMaster and now transitioning into Parks Canada, and how a lot of the skills that I learned at Mac, trip leading and project management and budgets and risk management plans and all of those things really are the skills that led to me getting a job with Parks Canada. So I guess you guys are probably interested in that sort of thing. So I currently work for Georgian Bay Islands National Park, which is the biggest island is is Beausoleil Island. It's based out of Midland, Ontario, but you access the park, most people out of Honey Harbor. It's an amazing, beautiful park. It's Canada's smallest national park. And we have more amphibians and reptiles than any other place in Canada, including the Massasauga rattler, which is only protected within our park and the Bruce Peninsula. And those are really the only populations left in Canada. There's areas around the parks because the snakes do migrate, but they're really protected because they have the ecosystem of the park to thrive in. So that's really exciting. I work on the visitor services team, and a huge part of what I do is what I learned how to do at Mac. So my current role is product development, and that's anything to do with what a visitor might experience in our park could be a product. So if you see an interpretive sign, that's a product. If you stay at a campsite or in a cabin in our park, those are products. It might be web content. I'm working to develop online interpretation programs now, like in virtual reality, that's a product. It could be development of a new trail or anything. So it's pretty exciting. And a lot of these skills, just understanding how to create trips to adjust to distant visitors. So are you taking, young kids that I used to work with the altitude program, a lot of the school groups that would come in, or corporate groups and older people, or school groups, and tying things into curriculum. And then from there, just, if you take out trip planning and sort of break it down into its parts, like all of those skills are transferable to what I do directly now. So it's pretty amazing. And one of the parts of my work that I'm the most proud of is Parks Canada, as a branch of the federal government, has been identified by the federal government as the best, probably most makes sense for us to work on reconciliation with Indigenous populations, because we're based in land management, and so much Indigenous culture, heritage, and path towards reconciliation is based around land use and management. And so a huge part of my job is working with Indigenous people, telling Indigenous stories, and working with Indigenous people from the ground up on basically every project that we do, so that their voices, opinions, and legacy are brought into the collective understanding of Parks Canada, because we manage land and we're storytellers of culture and heritage. And our mandate fits directly with a lot of the Indigenous goals of a lot of Indigenous people across the country. So that's part of the work that I'm the most proud of. I guess I could start with way back at Mac, I went over and reviewed a lot of the trips that I'd done. It's incredible, the breadth of places that I got to visit with Mac. And I attribute a lot of that to Wayne. You guys know him. He really has this skill that he can identify people's strengths, and then he trusts you and lets you run with it. So you can make your time at McMaster whatever you want it to be with the outdoor club. Dream big. And I did when I was at Mac, leading the first Grand Canyon trip and the first trip out to the Rockies, and then Peter and I heading all the way up to Baffin Island. It was just incredible, the amazing places I saw with the amazing people. And I'm still in touch with people from MOC from all around the world. I've traveled over to Europe and sent out a Facebook post, and about 25 people gathered in a pub in London spontaneously who were around and kind of came in on the train, and it was incredible out of the blue. So while I was working at McMaster, it was great because I could get my summers off. And while I was a student, and then later when I was just working, I worked kind of as Wayne's assistant, but I would still only have to work 8 months a year. And then I would take off in the spring and go work for an outdoor education center in the Rockies in the spring. And then I would fly up to the Northwest Territories, and I would spend most of my summers guiding on the Nahanni River, which was incredible. And while I was up there, I made a lot of really strong community connections. We worked with Indigenous people as cultural hosts. And we would meet them just at town community gatherings and functions. We also took school kids from the local school, and we would take them down the river with Parks Canada staff and elders and teach them, because this is their traditional traveling territory. They would go up into the mountains in the winter and live in moose hide tents and go hunting in the forest. And in the spring, they would take the moose skins and they would build huge boats that would fit 2 or 3 families. And they would travel down in spring flood down the Nahanni River. And they would all gather at the confluence of the Liard and the Mackenzie River, where Fort Simpson now is. And so this was reconnecting those students with their heritage. And through them, I met a lot of people, and I learned a lot about culture, about cultural sensitivities and what Indigenous people have gone through in this country, which I'm not going to get into. But that's really what led me to be able to get my first job with Parks Canada. It was a very, very remote posting, but once I'd gone to Baffin Island with Peter, and we'd based the Baffin Island hike out of a tiny community called Kiktarjuak on Broughton Island, which is about halfway up Baffin Island on the east side facing Greenland. And it's a small community, I think 400 or 500 people, remote fly-in access only. And those people spent their lives on the land. It was just incredible. And it made me realize that I wanted to go live in a community like that. So I spent a long time applying for jobs with the government and finally found the right job in the right place. And that for me was in Paulatuk in the Northwest Territories. It was a remote community. It's right on the Arctic Ocean. I realized I should probably be talking with my PowerPoint. Who cares at this point? I had all of this signed up with videos, but let me just try and get here. Let me just see if I can do this. I won't start at the beginning. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Okay, I might not actually be able to do this. It's my dad's computer. Slideshow. And I think, okay, well, we'll just go from the, here we go. Let's see if this works. This was just all my mock stuff. These are old photos I just pulled off. That's, hold on, Madawaska Whitewater Leaders trip. That's, Peter, were you on this trip? Overnight winter camping in Temagami for a week? Yeah. Doing whitewater clinics on the Madawaska River for the leaders, just to learn basic whitewater skills. Caving in Kentucky, one of my favorite trips of all time. Hiking in the Rockies in, you guys, Noah, you guys have done that one.
Yeah,
recently?
we do Rockies kind of every other year.
Cool. Oh, cool. Obviously, this is Monument Valley, Grand Canyon. Peter, are you in this photo? This is backpacking on Baffin Island. So just epic landscape. The mountains and the fjords, and then they just drop cliffs right down into the water, and the water's turquoise. It's gorgeous with icebergs. That is Virginia Falls in the Nahanni, wearing my mock outdoor leader sweatshirt. Canoeing on the Nahanni, epic scenery on the Nahanni. Oh yeah, rafting in front of icebergs on Alsek Lake in Alaska. Hiking on the Alsek River in Alaska. We were on a 2-week river trip. Hiking on a glacier. Anyway, okay, so this is where I am. Can you guys all see this photo? This is Paulatuk.
Yeah.
You can see the picture? Awesome.
Yeah.
So this is the community I lived in for about 5 years. It's right on the Arctic Ocean. That's what we're flying in over, is the Arctic Ocean. You can't get there by road. It's on the tundra. It's the community that's just west of the Northwest Territories and Nunavut border. It's an incredible community, and it's under a settled land claim. So the Inuit in the Western Arctic and the Inuit in the Eastern Arctic now have they have governance of their own land. They have indigenous governance. And once they got all of this territory settled in a land claim, they wanted to protect the calving grounds of the blue-nosed caribou herd, which is very, very important for their community. It's the basis of their culture, caribou. And they wanted to protect the calving grounds. And so they invited Parks Canada in, and they settled and negotiated a park management agreement, very similar to Haida Gwaii, that they have equal say with the government in how the park was managed. And they demanded equal say because it was their land. And before they turned it back to management of the federal government, they wanted to make sure that the government couldn't override them on any decisions. It's incredibly powerful. What it means is that you have consensus decision-making management, and everyone sits at a table. There's representatives from Parks Canada, myself and the field unit superintendent. There's representatives from the territorial government. There's representatives from the community. There's representatives from the Indigenous government, and there's representatives of the federal government. So there is an employee, a former employee of Parks Canada, who represents all of your interests as taxpayers, sitting on the board for this cooperative management board for this park. And we meet 3 or 4 times a year, once in the community, once out on the land, once in Inuvik at a minimum, and we make all of the decisions for the park around hiring, around what projects are going to be run, what kind of research is done, and how the stories of the park get shared with Canadians. It's really, really powerful. When you have consensus-based decision making, it's not a democracy, so no one's voice can be overruled. Everyone at the table has to agree before a proposition will move forward. So it demands that everybody comes to the table and listens, because you have to want to reach agreement and consensus. And so the federal government cannot overrule the community, but likewise, the community cannot overrule the federal government. So if the community wants to do something, but the federal government says we don't have the budget or it doesn't align with our priorities, the government can say no. But similarly, we wanted to do infrastructure development to put a landing strip in the park so we could land planes on tundra tires on the land, because right now we can only fly in with helicopter or float plane. It's very expensive. And the community said they weren't ready to develop it, that they were worried about concerns for the environment and the impact it would have on wildlife. And so Parks Canada scrapped the project. So it's really, it's very, very interesting because you learn a lot. So anyway, it was powerful and beautiful to be in this community and to become a part of this community for about 5 years. This is Tuktut Nogait National Park. And Noah, you did an awesome job. That's how I pronounced Tuktut Nogait when I was applying for the job. But in Inuvialuit, I'm butchering it as well, but it's Tuktut, which means the place of the many caribou. Tuktut is 1 caribou, Tuktut is 2 caribou, and Nogait means a yearling caribou, so from birth until 1 year of age. So this place, this park name means the place where many young caribou are, so the calving grounds. One of the places that we use most out in the park, we fly into this cold, remote Arctic lake called Uyarslavik Lake, the place of stone, and there's big stone cliffs, and there's lots of Inuit archaeology, stone tent rings. Close by here, there is a huge archaeological site that has been used. We have evidence for at least 500 years of hunting caribou as they cross the river, and they still use that. I've been out in the park and seen 1,000 caribou crossing at that site at one day. So we fly out to this building and stay and maybe do 2 weeks of camping, but we go all over the park with the cooperative management board and with community groups and with visitor groups. This is one of the incredible canyons. It's got epic scenery for an Arctic park. The Arctic is kind of notoriously flat, but here there have been rivers that have carved deep, deep, deep canyons into this park. And there's another one with absolute, I'm sorry for the quality of the pictures. I've been really busy and I just pulled them off Facebook just for quickly. Anyway, but you can see like this is epic scenery for the canyons. It's more something you would see in the American Southwest or the mountains, but we have 2 spectacular canyons like this. This is 2 of the cultural hosts we go out on the land with. So Parks Canada never travels out onto the land without bringing community members with us. They act as the eyes and the ears for the community because this community has a lot of distrust of the government. They want to make sure that we are acting in the interests of the animals. And also their knowledge is so valuable wherever you go. They know so much about the land and animal behaviors and weathers that Parks Canada staff love it because we learn so much every time we go down the land with community members. This is Reuben Green. That was Jonah Nakamayak and Reuben Green. And Jonah Nakamayak, I'll actually say, he was born on the land. He grew up wearing caribou skin clothing and living in a hide tent, building igloos in the winter with his family. His parents were killed when he was 14 years old. They died of botulism, eating bad meat in a cache. Out in the land, like they were nomadic and traveling. And so he was orphaned at the age of 14. And the people in the community heard about him and they picked him up and took him up to the DEW line, which is the Arctic long distance radar sites during the Cold War. And they taught him how to speak English and taught him how to drive and fix machines. And so he calls himself an Eskimo that lives between two worlds, but he can travel from Paulatuk 300 kilometers in any direction with a map inside his head. He's one of the most incredible people I've ever met. And Reuben is his really good buddy, incredible teacher, one of the best outdoor cultural educators, interpreters that I've ever met in my life. That's Reuben. The clothing is very traditionalist community. He's wearing a traditional men's ruff on his hood. That's a wolverine, the strips that go over the arms, and the men wear the claws, and the women can have the same thing, but they don't wear the claws. This is Reuben out at the cultural site I was telling you about, the stones arranged in this area. This is a kayak rest, and they would cache the kayaks here and they would find their way out. They spent most of their time in the winter out on the ocean because they could hunt seals and mammals, but they would come inland. This is about 70 kilometers inland via the river. And this is an area where I told you there's still caribou that cross here by the thousands every year, right at this spot. It's a ford, a narrow spot in the river. And just below this point, the deep, deep, deep canyons start in this, and you can't cross the river because of the canyons from this point out to the ocean. So they would come up to this point. This is why the caribou always cross here. They would cache kayaks, and then there's hunting blinds and food caches where they would store their meat. They would bury them in cracks in the rock, cover them with rocks. Actually, I've got pictures of that too. Yeah, like this is an open meat cache. So they could fit up to 12 caribou inside one of these deep cracks in the rock. It's like the Niagara Escarpment where the rock split and fractured, and then they cover it over with stone. And then they come back in the winter when they're not on foot. Now they have dog teams and sleds, and they can come up here and collect the meat and bring it back home in the winter. And they've been doing this for hundreds, if not thousands of years. This is another kayak rest. These are all examples from that site that I was telling you about, where we would come here almost every year to run cultural camps. This is another piece of a wooden piece of kayak. And even though it's probably about 500 years old, we've been doing carbon dating on some of this stuff. The Arctic environment, there's no bacteria in the soil. And so things like this just take forever to decompose. Some of the other stuff we do, this is research around salmon are becoming invasive in the Arctic. They're coming up from the Pacific, and they're overtaking char streams and habitat, which is really tragic for the local people who depend on char. Is about 1/3 of their diet. So this is a local community member and a scientist from Environment Canada, I believe, and we're setting sensors down into the riverbed to collect salinity, temperature, depth of the river, all sorts of markers, and then they come back and collect the data, and they can see where the salmon are starting to take over the breeds, just collecting data. So this is an example of whenever we go out on the land, whatever project we're doing, we always bring along community members. This is the size of some of the fish we catch up in these Arctic lakes. That's a lake trout, just incredible. And that's one of the best treats that they make it into, which is called dry fish. That's Arctic char, and it's like candy. It's so good. While I was in Paulatuk, I got to go out on the land with the community members. This is not during work. This is on my own time, but this is a spring goose hunt with an elder, Noel Green. And you can see we built a blind out of the snow, and you wear as much white as possible. His pants are dirty, but they're white pants. And you hide, and all the geese that come up here and they migrate through, and all the birds that you guys see on the way in the spring heading north, they all come up to the Arctic and they nest and they land. This is a huge part of food for the community. Each family gets on average about 120 geese a year. So it's a big deal to get to go out on the land and hunt with community members. I'm sorry if any of you are vegan, but that's a muskox. I didn't hunt it. It was hunted by a community elder, that same elder, but he he oversaw me and allowed me to skin his muskox for him so that I could learn, which is just the most incredible experience. And then he gifted me some of the meat. I still have that skin. I have been plucking out kiviot, which is the underdown of the muskox, which keeps them warm in minus 40 conditions. It's the softest, warmest, most expensive wool on the planet. And now I have a big box of it that I've plucked out and cleaned. And I've started to hand spin it using an old-fashioned spindle and then knit it. So it's pretty incredible. Like that animal, many years after it, is going to provide clothing and meat. So this is in the Parks Canada office, and this is an elder, Liz Kaptana, who's just recently passed. But we hired her from Parks Canada to teach traditional skills to the youth. So these are 3 of the boys who came in. They're scraping in the very first processes of tanning a caribou hide. And from there, we tanned the hide with community members over a period of 6 weeks. And then we cut out mitten patterns, and we did a mitt sewing making workshop. And every community member who participated got to take home their very own pair of caribou mitts, which was pretty incredible. There's a huge gap in knowledge between elders and youth because of residential schools. And these children, their parents were taken away and beaten essentially for speaking their traditional languages. So a lot of the time now the elders only speak Inuvialuktun and the children only speak English. And so it's very hard to transfer skills. So we're doing what we can, which is a drop in the bucket. But those are some of the programs that I'm the most proud of. This is me down in Fort Simpson. This is actually during my guiding age, but this is a different type of moose hide tanning. This is traditional Inuit tanning, and they don't do smoke tanning. A lot of people think of home tanned, smoke tanned hide with this amazing smell. The Inuit don't have access to wood because they live on the Arctic Ocean in the tundra. So they use other means to tan their hides. Whereas down south, they scrape both sides off the hides here. And in the end, and they soften it. And in the end, they make really supple leather with no fur on it. And the finishing process is that they smoke it with rotting, generally rotting spruce. And so anyway, just that's where I started learning a lot of these skills. And these are things that help me really make community connections in the North when they know that I learned how to make moccasins and how to tan hides and things like that. So some of my other interests here, this is just, I'm really into traditional and herbal medicine. So every spring I go out, these are white poplar buds. You'll know them if you smell them, if you see them. It's a super common tree all over Ontario, but that sticky resin that's on my finger is actually camphor. That's one of the main ingredients in cough syrup Buckley's, and it's a topical anesthetic. So if you take that that poplar bud in the spring and you suck on it, your whole throat will go numb like cough syrup. So I take that and I soak them in an oil, coconut or olive or whatever I'm making, and then I make a really incredible topical balm. It is a topical anesthetic. So if you burn yourself or you have bug bites or a rash, you can put this on. And because of the camphor, it essentially takes away the pain. So it's incredible. I just thought you guys might know. I also do a lot of canning. This is dandelion jelly, which is crazy delicious and really easy to make. I make a lot of that kind of stuff. And I guess that's the end of my presentation. So, okay, hold on. So there I am up in Polytech. I told you guys about my job And how do I get back to just stop my video? Huh. Meeting controls. Oh, there we go. Okay, can you guys just see me again?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's a lot of sort of what I did up north, what I do now, mock, and I'm just curious, like, what questions you guys might have. Hey, Peter. I can't hear you. Okay, Peter's gone.
Oh, I don't know where he went.
Oh, Fiona Chapman raised her hand. Okay.
Yeah, I had a quick question. So thank you for your
Yeah.
presentation. That was like fantastic.
Really? I felt like I rambled. Thank you.
No, well, it's nice to hear more, I guess, people's experiences and stories. I think we're so used to now sitting in front, listening to someone just watching words on the slides go by. So it was really nice to see the photos and the experiences. So yeah, that was good. I had a question about, so I'm personally studying cold region hydrology for my master's. So I've worked a bit on Melville Island.
Oh, amazing.
Which was awesome. Yeah, one summer. And along the Dempster Highway.
Yeah.
So you're sort of, what you're up to is like super intriguing to me. And I was just wondering, I know you mentioned that when you were working in the community, there was quite a lot of, I don't want to say resistance, but distrust in the government. And when you were placed,
resistance, distrust. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pardon?
When you went up, did you find that it was hard to integrate into the community at first? Or were you able to sort of do that no problem?
Okay, well, that is a very good question. And so partly I had a much easier time of it because I have spent so long developing traditional skills. So what I find when I go up and the women start to see the moccasins that I've made and some of the sewing that I do, they take me a bit more seriously because they know that I've sat down with other elders, right? They kind of like that I've been gifted skills and that I've spent this time and I've developed time. So that was one of the big one was my foot in the door, but I didn't always have that. So when I started, like that was a big help for me in Polytech, but you also have to understand, sorry, and I'll get to this a little bit earlier because I know not all of you probably make moccasins, so that's not very useful. But that also, some people really resented me for that because I was an outsider. And one of the really interesting, like impactful stories that I heard was a girl who came up to me and said, you know, I've never learned any of this stuff. I think she said, I'm 27 years old and now it's too late for me because I wasn't taught this stuff by my parents. And I said, like, I'm, you know, at the time I was like, I'm 37 years old. Like I don't have an embarrassment. And my aunt's the same. My aunt was adopted in the 60s Scoop. If you guys know what that is, she's Chippewa. My family adopted her. We're white. And she really lost disconnection with her culture. She says this all the time, that she has shame because she doesn't know her traditional skills, but I had no shame associated with that. So I was very able to ask elders, like, I'd love to sew with you. Can I sit down? So that was really interesting. And some people resented me for that I had skills that they didn't have that weren't their cultural skills. So there's sort of a bitter edge to everything. But when I was young, and I think that this applies to you guys at MAC. So when I first started going up to Fort Simpson and guiding on the Nahanni, I started on the Nahanni and at MAC my first year. They were the same year. And I didn't know a lot of traditional skills or how to make moccasins, but I did have an ability to connect with kids. And so I made friends with kids in the community. Like I said, they came down the river with me and I triple-led a river with a school group. And then every time I would go to a Canada Day festival in the small town, everyone's at those festivals. So anywhere I'd go, the kids would be like, you got to come and meet my mom or come and meet my auntie or come around with. And so I was introduced to the community through the kids. And once the kids trusted me, and then they started inviting me to their homes, and parents got to know me. And so that was how I first developed relationships in Fort Simpson. I think, you can find out your own way, but like the thing is, at the end of the day, I was in that community for 5 years. I was adopted by families. I have people who I feel like are family in Paulatuck still and always will, but I will always be an outsider in those communities. And it is hard. As integrated as I was and accepted as I was also attacked just for the fact that I was an outsider and I worked for the government. So it's not easy. I mean, but it's worth it. All the challenges are worth it if you get the chance to go up there. And if you, this is Fiona, right, that I'm talking to?
Yes, yeah.
So if you are interested, I mean, like there's a lot of jobs in Inuvik and places along the Dempster, up in those communities. And if that's something you're interested in applying for, whether it be for the territorial government or the federal government, like you can contact me and I'd be happy to give you tips or pointers.
Yeah, that would be awesome. First of all, I recently applied to a posting. There's a couple of technicians in the Eastern Arctic. So that was just over summer. So we'll see. We'll see if that comes through.
With the federal government or with the territorial?
With Parks Canada.
Excellent. Okay.
But
Parks Canada is awesome. Here's what I would say with that, and this is advice to anyone. Apply. It's a little harder to get hired in Nunavut for your first time. I think they generally have a little bit more, they really want to get people their own land claim agreement beneficiaries in. So generally in Nunavut, this probably isn't for Parks Canada, but they usually have a couple of piles of resumes, and they'll go through, and the first pile will be all land claim beneficiaries. So Inuit who were born in the Eastern Arctic, like people from the Western Arctic where I lived aren't beneficiaries of the Eastern Arctic and vice versa. So they'll have that, and then they'll have people who already live in the North and but are not beneficiaries, but they're a safer bet to hire because they already know how crazy it is to go through an Arctic winter, which in Paulatuck, the sun didn't rise for 2 months. From about November 14th to January 21st, there wasn't sun. So that's kind of a huge extreme for people in the South to go through. And if they don't find people within those pools, then they might look in the South. Now the federal government can't do that. They put you all in. But here's what I would say, like you probably get a better chance of getting a job in the Northwest Territories than you will in Nunavut applying, but apply for them all. And if you aren't successful in the first competition, ask for feedback, and like keep in mind that if you did really well in the competition but you didn't get the highest score, you won't get offered the job, but they will still know that you did well. And when the next position comes up, they're like, you're more likely to be higher in the pile, and they have ways. And like if you've interviewed, they might say, well, they didn't get that position, but this position's about to open, someone's going to go on maternity leave or something, maybe we can offer them that position. So it's just really, really good to keep trying, and good luck. Like I'm going to go up to Nunavut one day. I'm going to do an acting assignment for a year or two up in Nunavut for sure.
Awesome. That's great advice.
To come home.
Thank you.
Yeah, I needed to come home. It was really, really hard and remote to be away from my family for that long. As incredible as the experience was, 5 years was a long time. So
awesome. Thanks.
I also sent to NOAA today a general staffing notice for student positions for anybody who's a full-time student now and returning as a full-time student in the fall. You can apply to, this is one for our field unit, which is a collection of geographically located parks. So it's Bruce Peninsula, Georgian Bay Islands National Park, Bethune National Historic Site, Thousand Islands. And we're hiring a whole range of student positions, anything from administrative work to heritage presenters, interpreters, to scientists and technicians. It's an amazing way to get your foot in the door, and they're more general interviews. You can apply for them all. But I think all parks and sites will be hiring for the student positions soon. So if you guys are interested in working for Parks Canada this summer, it's kind of the best summer job you could ever have. Yeah. Anybody else have a question? Oh, Peter's back.
Yeah, okay, so I think you told me that in 2017, when Parks Canada had their anniversary
Yeah.
and the government bypassed the admission to all the
Yeah.
parks, that you only had one visitor.
Yeah.
Just to show you how remote it is and hard it is to get there. But I thought that was a
Yeah.
pretty amazing statistic.
Yeah, it was 2017, the 150th year anniversary. Parks Canada had record attendance at all of our sites. And in that year, I had one park visitor, and he was from Germany.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And another
think-
question.
Yeah.
So I just recently saw a National Geographic documentary, whatever, on bears.
Yeah.
And they mentioned that the polar bear is the only bear in the world that doesn't hibernate. Would you agree with that? That's true?
Yeah. Polar bears are out in the winter. They're out in the summer. Every other bear I know hibernates. I mean, I don't know about South American. There's like a striped bear or something, or I don't know about a panda bear, but out of blacks and grizzlies and polar bears, yeah.
But polar bears do hibernate?
No,
So
the females will nest. They'll dig a nest to have their babies, but the males are out year round.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In fact, like Peter, like we saw, you weren't with me at that point, right? We saw a polar bear in Kikatarjuak, and I've seen one in Polotok. They were both in the summer, but the polar bear's main habitat is they do most of their hunting in the winter on the ice.
Yeah. I guess
I'll say their polar bears and the grizzly bears are interbreeding up around Polotok in that area. So
Wow.
I don't know if you guys have heard of growler bears, which are part polar bear, part. Yeah, they're the hunters from Polotok see those out on the land. And they're really incredible. Like they have distinct patterning, physical features of like, you'll have a polar bear head and a grizzly bear body. And they're usually, when they've seen them with the cubs, it's grizzly bear mothers. So they assume they have polar bear dads. So that's interesting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Adaptations to climate change. Because normally they don't really come into that much contact with each other.
Yeah, the polar bears are probably coming further south.
Yeah.
To eat. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Does anybody else have questions about anything? If you do have questions, like if you guys are interested in working for parks, it's an amazing place to work. We have jobs, and I mean, it's incredible the span. We have media and communications people. We have, a lot of people think about us as just park rangers or interpreters, but there's everything behind the scenes to pull off the policy. There's policy people, there's administration people, there's an incredible array of scientists getting to work on the most exciting projects. And I work a lot in Indigenous engagement, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I don't know if you have any questions about that or how you could apply for Parks Canada. I'm willing to sit down. Just you can get my contact information from Noah, and I'll be willing to sit down with you. Hi, Brian Anderson.
Hi, this is unrelated to Parks Canada, but you said you make dandelion jelly, and I'm a big fan of making my own jellies. Cool. I was wondering if you could send Noah the recipe so that he could send it to me.
Sure. You know what though? To be honest with you, I just Googled it. It's super easy. If you can't find it online, like just Google it, but there's a million of them and it's so easy. You just pick a bunch of dandelions, make it into a tea. So you pour hot water, and I think I had to steep it overnight. And then then that like kind of leaches all the flavor. It tastes gross, but after you add sugar, you add pectin, boom. It's just like, I make a lot of floral jelly. So I make lilac jelly, violet jelly, dandelion jelly. Oh, the most amazing one I made when I was up north, which is fireweed jelly. And it comes out like pinky, like fuchsia. Yeah, you can make it. Rose petal jelly was one of my favorites. Spruce tip jelly is another one. I make spruce tip jelly and spruce tip syrup, which is incredible. It's medicinal. It has a ton of vitamin C and antioxidants in it. And you can pick the spruce tips in the spring when they grow, put them in the freezer, and you can make the jelly in winter when it's not hot anymore and you've got some time. Yeah.
Thank you.
If you do anything like, if you do a presentation on jellies and stuff, I'd sit down and listen to that. I love anything to do with foraging, traditional medicine. I gather mushrooms, I gather berries. I love it all.
Hey, have you read the book Braiding Sweetgrass?
It's one of my favorite books on the planet.
Yeah.
If any of you have not read this book, I think it should be taught in curriculum in high school for every Canadian student.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about it, Peter?
Just when I read it, I was thinking of you because I knew it was something you'd like, and I'm not surprised that you've read it. It's just it's an Indigenous woman from Upper New York State who's a prof at a college in the States, and she teaches plant biology, but more not so much from the Western scientific point of view, but from an Indigenous attachment to the land, and which was something you probably won't get in a university. But I really enjoyed it, and a well-written book too. You know, it's like, yeah, very, very. And apparently, she has another book that I
called
guess it's
Gathering Moss.
Yeah, I haven't read that yet.
Yeah.
You've read it?
Well, if it wasn't Zoom, I'd come and drop it off. If it wasn't COVID, I'd come and drop it off for you to borrow. Yeah, it's incredible because she blends Western scientific knowledge as an ecology professor, but she combines it with her traditional Indigenous knowledge. So a lot of it is about relationship of plants and humans and how we fit into the world. And one of the most beautiful stories in the book, where she takes the title from, which is called Braiding Sweetgrass. So sweetgrass, just quick, is a very sacred medicine for Indigenous people. It used to grow prolifically across North America, but it's becoming very rare. And so they did a study, and one of her students, like, they proposed it, I think, for this woman's PhD study, and they said, we want to look at investigating how harvesting sweetgrass might affect the plant itself, because where we have traditional local Indigenous healers who are harvesting sweetgrass, the grass is still prolific, but where this has fallen out of vogue, like, the sweetgrass dies off. So we want to see if there's a relationship with the plants. And the university board said, that's absolutely ridiculous. We don't approve this as thesis work, because we all know that if you harvest plants, you detrimentally affect them. So you don't need to do a thesis on it. But she actually went on her own, and she planted a bunch of sweetgrass plots, and she had some as test plots and she just left them. She had some that were harvested by various methods. Some people just yanked them out. Some people nicely trimmed them. They looked at them all after a year, and the plots that were not touched, the test plots, had almost all died off. But all of the plots that had been harvested, no matter what way they'd been harvested by humans, were growing prolifically. So they said, this is crazy. They took it back, and the university approved her research. And what they found out is that by tearing or plucking the leaves of the sweetgrass, that it stimulates the rhizomes in the plant's roots, which cause them then to sprout. And so humans, fundamentally, like the Indigenous people, see sweetgrass as one of the gifts that was given by the Creator, and that if humans don't use the gift, then it's going to die out. And sweetgrass is only prolific because of the use in its relationship with humans. So it's a really, really cool blending of traditional Indigenous knowledge with Western scientific knowledge, which is actually like one of the greatest struggles that we see in terms of reconciliation. In my role, working for the federal government and then working with our Indigenous partners, is how to really take those two knowledge-based systems, which is like, could talk forever about, and really give them equal footing. So it's an incredibly beautiful book, which speaks to reconciliation, and it's almost poetic to read, even though she's writing about very complex scientific ideas as well. So I hugely recommend it. There. So Anything else anyone wants to ask? I've done so much talking. I'm self-conscious.
What would you say is the best way for people to get their foot in the door in your industry? And also the best way to get experience in Indigenous knowledge?
Okay, interesting. Well, if you're at Mac has an amazing Indigenous studies program. So if you have any non-course, what do you call them? What do you call them? Open
Electives.
courses? Electives. Thank you.
Electives.
God, I've been away from university for too long. If you have any elective courses, just sign up for some, first year, second year Indigenous studies courses. And I bet you as well that even just going in and talking to them, they have an office there. They were incredible and open, and they run events on campus. And I bet you can participate in some of those. Wayne, we used to run trips out to the Six Nations Reserve. Wayne had a friend named Mona who has since died, unfortunately, but that might be something that I'm sure there's someone on the Six Nations Reserve and you could contact them and they would run some sort of cultural program and you could run it through McMaster. I'm sure there'd be so many people who are interested in that. A lot of it, I think I'm going to answer the last part of that question, tying it into the other question you had, which is how do you get a foothold in my industry, which is, I'd say, like the federal government or territorial government, or just working, if you end up, even some private research firms, things like that come up. Anyway, sorry, I'm just kind of collecting my thoughts. So there's a lot of turnover in the North in positions. People go on maternity leave. A lot of people come up and apply for job in Parks Canada, but will only stay for a couple of years because it's really hard to be up North. It's really cold. You're away from your family. So they'll go up North and apply. And then like I came home and I'm working in Ontario now, right? So you'll see that there's jobs over and over again. What I would say, first of all, is go onto, from the federal government, you can go onto jobs.ca, and whatever field you're in, go in and click and sign up for an account, and they will start sending you. You can set your parameters of salary, experience. If you want to work for Parks Canada, Indigenous Services, Agriculture Canada, whatever. And every time a job gets posted publicly that fits into your criteria that you're looking for, they'll send you a job notification. You renew it once a year. It's phenomenal. Even if you don't have enough experience at this point, you can start looking, like I'm already looking 5 years out what I want to do, looking at job postings that I might want to grow into. And then I know how, okay, I'm missing that piece of, like it might be something like experience. I don't know, if you're a scientist, like experience with one kind of data management program or something, we'll go in and research that, figure out how you can do, like there's so much opportunity at McMaster. While I was there, I sat on the board of directors for the Giants Rib, which is the Niagara Escarpment. It's like a nonprofit group, and I did outreach for kids, which was super easy. It was what I did at McMaster, but it looked amazing on my resume to be on a board of directors. And so, sorry, I'm a little tangenting going off and talking about, but like when you go up and apply, there's so much turnover up North. You keep applying for those jobs. They expect a lot of people come up from the South to not know about Indigenous consultation, things like that. So they do in-person training. You would have to go on and be able to say, like, I've read the land claim. I understand what, Indigenous governments is, what their rights are, what's consultation, like why this is important, even stuff like understanding residential school and the Indian Act. And, it's like having understanding for where people are at and why these communities are hurting. You go and work up North, you're going to see a lot of alcoholism and physical abuse. These communities are traumatized. In Paulatuk, this is going to be hard to say, but 85% of the women, basically all the women over the age of 20, and many of the men have been raped, many of them by their family members, many of them by their teachers and people in residential schools. And that cycle of abuse continues. And I already said, like, the language between the elders speaking their traditional language and the youth only speaking English, so they can't transition that. But there was also a generation lost of people who didn't know, they didn't have parents. They were stolen from their family at the age of 4 and beaten. And they lost their culture. and they didn't know how to be parents, and now they're raising children, and so it gets passed on. So you have to have understanding for why people act the way they do, and people coming up and not understanding that can have it can be very discriminatory, and that's really hard to see. And when you come into it with open eyes, it gives you compassion and understanding. So I think like those are the things that they would look for in an interview. And then when you got up north and started working for the government, you can expect training, you can get involved. Everything's open to all community members. So you can go and take like a mitten making workshop or a beading workshop, or make friends with people in the community, and maybe they take you out on the land. So I'd say if you don't, I was lucky because I'd spent all my time at MAC working up north in the summers and developing relationships. And but I would say that was exceptional, and that most people who've come up and done my job, I think I'm the 5th person to do it. Most of them didn't have extensive Indigenous experience. But if you can understand the context of the way Indigenous people live their lives today, and understand the land claims and how that would affect your job, then that's what's going to get your foot in the door. That's pretty heavy stuff, but even in the southern parks now, I'm working at a park out of Midland, Ontario, so like 3 hours away from MAC, or 2.5, and so much of this is now working on developing Indigenous relationships and Indigenous consultation, what their history is, what stories need to be told. And a lot of that's really hard. When our park became a park in 1929, there were Métis people with Ojibwe ancestry, and they were kicked off the island when it became a national park, and they lost their homesteads and generations of their family land. And Indigenous people, like, we have archaeological evidence of them using this island for 5,000 years, but they have no say. They don't have access to gather their traditional medicines as they used to. So, and after this area was settled, they were put onto this island, which is sand. They were never meant as human, like year-round habitation. It was a summer fishing camp on this island. And they sent them over and said, oh, you like that place? You can live over there. You grow all these crops. And they built them like settler style, kind of like crappy log cabins. And they basically starved to death. There's a cemetery in the national park and the ruins of this old village. And they all starved to death for about 20 years until they said, we have to leave. Like, we can't, the soil won't support crops. We're not allowed to leave the island, so we can't travel as we normally would and hunt and fish. And so, that's a part of the history of this national park. And so even being in the South, it's a big part of what we do here is, like I said, working on reconciliation. So it's the #1 priority of Parks Canada, I would say, at this moment, besides our mandate, which is conservation, education, and sort of operationally, our #1 mandate is Indigenous relationships. Okay, anybody else?
Any other questions? All right, then to end it off, what is your best story that you can share with us?
Oh, that's ridiculous. Of my time at MAC?
Your time at MAC or your time at Parks Canada, whichever is better. I know that's hard.
Like an almost impossible question.
You can share 2 if you want. One.
Oh no, I don't know. God, it's like, that's such a crazy question. I'm really, I've had ridiculous adventures in my life. Sorry. I think, well, okay, here's one, shows a little vulnerability. So I was a whitewater rafting guide. I don't know why I chose this story, whatever. I'm a whitewater rafting guide. I said I was on the Nahanni. That's a big river to canoe. you know, you can get 25-foot waves in flooding conditions in the canyons. And no matter how good you are, everyone always flips on the Nahanni at some point. Like, it's a big river. But we did mostly rafting trips because that it suited older clientele. The people who actually wanted to go down the river and had the skills to do it would go on their own. People who are retired generally were too old to do it on their own, but they had the money. It was about $1,000 a day to come on a trip with us. So we would take them because rafting's safe, and we could bring all the comforts of home, the best steaks for dinner and salads and ridiculous. Like, I mean, it was just incredible, and tables and chairs, and it was amazing. So, but one of my dreams has always been to raft the Elsek River. And I don't know if you guys know about this river, but it's in Kluane National Park. Its headwaters are in the Yukon at Haines Junction, which is right on the edge of Kluane National Park. And it flows into Kluane on its way out to Alaska and out to the ocean and the Pacific Northwest. And it crosses the largest subpolar ice cap in the world. So when you fly over it by helicopter or plane, like, it looks like Greenland. It's just ice everywhere with massive glacial tongues, like stretching for kilometers and kilometers between mountains. And the river is notoriously really challenging. It's got a rapid on it called Lava North, which is a class 4, but it's on an extremely cold and remote river. And so the consequences for flipping here are life and death. In fact, in 2008, I had rafted the Tatachini, which is a sister river. They meet like a Y, and they flow out. The Tatachini flows into the Elsek, and they flow out to Alaska together. When I was rafting the Tatachini in 2008, someone drowned in Lava North on the Elsek while we were out on the river. They'd gone through and they'd flipped, and they hadn't had wetsuits on, and they drowned of dehydration. The son had to sit beside the body of his father all night on the side of the river while they waited to be rescued by helicopter the next day. So it's really crazy. There's class 6 rapids on the river. There's a place where the glacier presses up against the canyon wall of the mountain, and it's just churning. And there's a handful of people now, maybe 20, who have kayaked it. But when I was a kid, only a couple of people had ever kayaked it. And it was my dream to go on this river. And in 2011, I actually got to go raft it. And every single night, it was a guide's trip, so it wasn't for commercial paying guests. It was something that our boss did. He said, as long as I cover the costs, or you guys cover the costs, you guys all split it. You cover, you need to drive there. We get a helicopter portage around that really canyon crazy rapid of the glacier. And then at the end, you have to fly back from Alaska in a charter plane, because you end up in the middle of nowhere. And so as long as you guys split the cost of food and the gear and the flights, all the guides get to go for cost, and it's a learning experience for you. And you can bring your family, and they go for half price, and it's incredible. So here I was rowing like people's friends and families down the river in this raft, and I was having panic attacks at night that I was going to kill someone on this huge, huge river. This is actually the first trip I did after Baffin Island, Peter. So I still was kind of suffering from anxiety regarding the Baffin Island trip, which is a story I didn't tell. But I made it through. I got to raft that river. It was really, really hard. The river was huge and pulling, and you'd go by boulders in the river that were the size of house that could have flipped your raft. It's just so epic. And I would awake in the night in panic attacks thinking like tomorrow is going to be the day I'm going to flip and I'm going to kill someone. But I managed to row down the river, and I'm so proud of myself. And it's like one of those things, I'm never going to do it again. I never want to go back and raft that river. I would go back as a passenger on the raft. But yeah, that's just kind of one of those things. Like sometimes if I'd had my druthers, I think I would have, out of my own fear and my own insecurities, that I would have backed out. But somehow I forced myself to do it, and I succeeded. And like, yeah, I don't know. I'm super, super proud of myself. I don't know if that's like a dumb story, but anyway, there you go.
Great story. Amazing.
I don't know. I feel like that was a bad story. I could have chosen a better one. Should have asked me in advance. I could have thought about it, Noah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I think that was a good story.
Yeah. I did it, but I was scared. There's a lot of times I've gone out and thought I'm not going to be good enough, or I don't have the skills to do something. And in the end, I think I say this, especially as women in the outdoor industry, I think we doubt ourselves a lot. I see the way, sorry guys, but guys have a lot more confidence at when they have the same skill sets as us, and they'll go out and put themselves out more. I'm sorry, I'm not speaking for all of you. This is just something I've witnessed in myself and many of my colleagues, but women often won't put themselves up for the promotion or put their ideas forward. I doubt myself a lot. And I think a lot of the story in my life has been like looking back and being like, wow, I can't believe I did that. And that it was totally within my ability, and I was scared beforehand, but in the end, it was fairly easy, and I should have had more confidence in it. There, my 2 cents.
Well, thank you so much for coming out. I enjoyed the talk and learned a lot. I am assuming everyone else did as well.
Yeah, thanks for putting together, Noah, and great seeing Maya. You look great always.
Yeah, Peter, I'll come and visit once Corona's over. But in the meantime, I'd love to chat.
Sure.
Send me are you on Facebook Messenger?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, just send me a message and I'll give you my phone number and we can chat.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
I leave that open to anybody else. If I don't know if what I said was useful to you guys, but if you have any questions or anything I said, just contact me. I'm really happy to help anyone through mock. It was one of the most pivotal experiences in my life. The time I spent at mock, it opened so many doors for me. And just think when you're trip leading and you're planning and you're doing budgets and those risk management proposals, those are all transferable skills. And when you break down all of the things that go into being a trip leader, it's actually really incredible. Group leadership, being able to project lead, right? You're leading a group on a trip and all the complications and the things that go into that and the planning. And then you have to wrap up, the government also says, can you analyze what you did and then come up with recommendations about what to do better? Hopefully you do a lot of that when you're doing your stuff and volunteering at MAC. And I think about breaking down. It's not just leading trips. Those are really, really transferable skills to take you into the working world. And if you want to develop yourself in any way, Wayne's going to let you run with it. He's the most incredible mentor. So, really dream big. And if you have a couple more years at MAC or even in the time after you're working, setting out those goals, looking at job postings and developing specific little skills here and there. But really, when you're starting off in the beginning, you're probably not going to have every single work experience, but you might have a piece of that work experience in this thing and a piece of it in there. When you put it all together, you can say, I've got that kind of experience. So be creative and trust in your skills, because you've learned a ton of things just being involved in as a leader in the outdoor club.
Amazing advice.
Cool.
So thank you everyone for coming to our first speaker series event. We have another one in March or the end of February, but you can check our calendar.
Who else is coming?
Wayne is one of them. We have a outdoor industry panel the first week of March with the president of Paddle Canada, a Gould Lake guide, and someone to be determined. And we have a bunch of speakers at the end of March from the Outdoor Council of Canada, an environmental toxicologist from Environment Canada, who's an old club alumni from Newfoundland, and hopefully a few others.
Cool.
Lots of cool people coming up as well.
Yeah, it's amazing the people who have come through MAC and what they're doing, and they're around the world, and it's good to be a part of the alumni forever. MAC. Yeah. Okay, cool. I guess I'll sign off then. And thanks for your patience with my stupid PowerPoint and stuff, but It was good.
No, it was great. It was perfect.
Oh, okay.
amazing.
Yeah. Anyway. Okay. Cheers, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks,
This is like
everyone.
fun. Bye.
Bye.